It's Memorial Day 2019. People are out, enjoying the day off, thankful of the people that risked their lives and often gave them to keep us all safe. Many folks take this special, relaxing day to go camping. But I've got 5 good spooky reasons why camping at any point in time is needlessly risky, and of course terrifying. These are 5 scary camping stories, perfect for your Memorial Day evening. If you've got a story you want to share, send it to us at darkstories.org. We still need a few more Stickman stories. Bigfoot in West Texas, from Choi 2719. Back in 2013, I was in a Boy Scout camping trip in Northwest Texas. I'd barely turned 13, which was the minimum age to register for high adventure programs. I accepted a particular challenge of hiking 7 miles away from the base camp to a secluded camping location surrounded by mountains. I need to address the fact that we were really secluded out there. Our only source of light was the moon and a couple of flashlights. In addition, the program was a historical reenactment of Texas ranchers from the 1800s, which meant the camping spot had a small corral with 2 goats and a few hens. I felt somewhat safe as we were only 7 scouts and 3 staff members. Safety in numbers, right? If we had any medical emergencies, it would be an hour wait for an ATV to reach the campsite, and another hour for that ATV to reach base camp. To make things sound worse, the fact that the campsite was in between the mountains, that meant we did not have any cell phone signal. The first few days were very uneventful. We just worked on merit badges and swam in the river. The second night was when all hell broke loose. I woke up at around 1 in the morning to go use the outhouse. I tried to wake up my buddy, but he just told me to stop being scared as he covered his face back up with his sleeping bag. So I grabbed my flashlight and took the 20-meter walk to the outhouse. As I was walking, the goats were making these sounds. This only put me further on edge. It's weird how creepy goats can be at night. I entered the outhouse, and while I was doing my business, I heard small objects hitting the wooden structure. I took out my Swiss Army pocket knife, and trying to sound as intimidating as possible, I said, "Julian, cut it out." But I did not hear a response. Instead, I heard loud footsteps roaming around the outhouse. I turned off my light and prayed that whoever or whatever was outside would just leave me alone. After 8 extremely long minutes passed, I could no longer hear the footsteps. Even so, I stayed inside that outhouse for 10 more minutes, just to be safe. After those extra 10 minutes of nothing, I slowly opened the wooden door. I scanned my surroundings, but there was nothing out of the ordinary in my perimeter. I took a deep breath and swallowed. Then I booked it back to my tent, then covered myself in my sleeping bag. I could not sleep all night, and once the sun came up, I asked Julian, "Hey, nice try, but it's going to take more than a couple of rocks to scare me." Julian looked up at me, giving me this weird look, and said, "What do you mean, dude? I didn't leave the tent all night." Confused and worried, I began to wonder who could have been outside that outhouse. There was no way it wasn't someone playing a prank on me or trying to tease me as I used the bathroom. The following 2 days went by very fast, and at last it was the day to pack up camp and hike back to base camp. But the scoutmaster woke everyone up at 3 a.m. For some reason, he kept rushing all of us to pack only what we could carry. An ATV could come get the rest of the stuff later. An older scout asked why we had to leave 6 hours early. The scoutmaster responded, "You don't want to hike when it's 90 out, do you?" We all agreed. We then began our hike back to base camp. The scoutmaster and staff began to hurry us even more, jogging on the trail now. Being the youngest and the smallest, I was lagging behind to the point that I was alone on the trail. I stopped to catch my breath, and that's when I heard a sound that I will never forget. It was a whooping sound, echoing through the mountains. I whispered under my breath, "The hell is that?" Then I heard another whoop. I burst into a run down the trail, desperate to catch up with my peers. As I ran, I could hear footsteps that sounded like the ones that I heard when I was defenseless in that outhouse. I shone my flashlight to the surrounding woods. 2 amber eyes shone back at me. I thought my fear was taking the best out of me, but then I saw the eyes getting closer and closer. Then they blinked. I screamed, running down the trail, hearing occasional whooping sounds a good distance away behind me. After running for 6 minutes straight, I caught up with the troop who were wondering where I'd been. I asked the others, Did you guys hear those sounds?" Before anyone could speak, the scoutmaster sternly told us, "Stay quiet, you boys. You need to conserve your breathing. We have another 4 miles left to reach base camp." I nodded, and I kept walking with them, this time making sure to keep pace with them no matter what. We reached the base camp at around 8 a.m. The campers stared at us as we all looked like we had seen a ghost. I slept in a cafeteria chair for about 3 hours until some ATVs flew by with some hiking bags. I recognized my black High Sierra backpack. I went to wake up my troop to pick up their bags. It turns out, when we reached the base camp, the scoutmaster asked some of the staff members to help pick up our belongings. As I went to thank the staff members for helping pick up our gear, one of them looked at me very pale. He had walked away from the ATV and went right to the main office. After leaving our gear at the cafeteria, my troop as well as the staff members were called into the main office. Once we shut the door, the main scoutmaster told us, "You boys were really brave getting out of your comfort zone in the mountains. Just be careful with mountain lions. They normally don't attack humans, but it is best to take precautions. Please do not tell anyone about this trip. We don't want the scout organization to lose membership over a territorial mountain lion." We all responded with a quick "yes, sir," then walked out of the office without saying another word. Since one of our scouts had a merit badge that needed to be completed at base camp, we decided to spend the night here. Even if I was now surrounded by more than 300 scouts, I still felt uneasy about being out in the woods. That night, we had permission to sleep in the cafeteria, as the staff members weren't able to get our tents back yet. I still didn't feel safe there, not even with 4 walls surrounding me. I just wanted to get back to civilization. At around 2 a.m., I woke up, and after tossing and turning for a few minutes, I decided to stare out the window to pass the time. I began to adjust my eyes to the darkness, staring at 2 squirrels running around a small clearing. I watched the squirrels dart around and into the dense vegetation nearby. I then looked around, thinking that maybe another scout had scared them away. But what I saw gave me nightmares for days to come. There was no person out there. Instead, it was a gorilla-looking creature walking upright straight into the clearing where the squirrels once were. I could not believe what I was looking at. That creature stood staring at the main campground as everyone else slept. I wanted to call my scoutmaster, but I was paralyzed with fear. This hairy gorilla-looking thing, the creature, it must have stood at least 6 feet tall, judging by the tree it was next to, which my scoutmaster had been standing against earlier. I looked back at my sleeping troop members. Despite being surrounded by my own kind, I felt so helpless. When I looked back at the window, the thing was gone. After the longest 5 minutes in my life, I was able to move, and me being just a naive young boy, I covered myself in my sleeping bag until the sun came up completely. When the sun was high in the sky, we placed our belongings in the van and drove away. The ride back home was quiet. Everyone was either looking out the window or sleeping. I was relieved to be out of that secluded campground. Years after this incident, I spoke to another scout who had been there recently. I asked him about the trail, and he said, "Ah man, that trail's been closed since 2013, but no one really knows why." But I know why. To this day, I believe that what I saw was a Bigfoot. But I made a promise not to speak about what happened in that Texas campground. But I need to know if anyone else has had a similar experience out there. I can't be the only one, right? I think it chased us. From Bouncing Brick. Aside from a few odd occurrences here and there, this was my very first paranormal experience. Frankly, 7 years later, I still have no idea what really happened. When I was in 7th or 8th grade, my parents let me have a few friends over to spend the night for my birthday. To set the scene a bit, it was August in Wisconsin. We would spend the night outside in a tent, so as to not disturb my parents with giggling and acting up and whatnot. At about midnight that night, all but me and a girl named Rose had fallen asleep in our little campsite. We decided to walk around a bit. We lived out in the country, so we had a large plot of land surrounded by nothing but fields and trees. Thanks to the fact that we weren't close to the city, the sky was beautiful that night, clear enough to see the Milky Way. It was honestly the perfect night to walk around talking about life. It was pleasantly warm and just a bit breezy. We walked around the yard for about 2 hours, talking about our beliefs, our families, and what we thought we wanted to do with our lives. At one point, we had stopped to look at the stars. I shot a passing glance towards the north edge of the yard, which bordered an empty field. Then I had to do a double take, because I saw something out there. There was this solid black blob, just floating there at the edge of the yard. Yes, floating. That sounds ridiculous, which is why I thought I was just seeing things in the dark. It gave off no sound and no smell. It just floated there, kind of changing shape. If you've ever seen a video of water in zero gravity, it moved a bit like that, but slower. I felt no presence from this thing whatsoever, so clearly I was just hallucinating, right? "Hey Rose," I said, refusing to take my eyes off of that figure. "I think I'm seeing things or something." She looked away from the stars to give me a confused look. "What? What are you seeing?" she asked. I pointed to the thing and asked her if she could see it. "What is that?" She wanted to know after staring at it for a few seconds. I asked her to describe what she was seeing to make sure we were seeing the same thing, and to make sure she wasn't just playing along. But she described it in the exact same way I did for you. Keep in mind that the moon was bright and high overhead that night. We could see clearly for miles, except for the trees in the way, of course, so this was not some obscure shadow. Speaking of which, it was somehow darker than anything I'd ever seen, and it was in the middle of a flat, brightly lit piece of land. We were both looking at it. "Is that a bear?" she asked, grasping at straws. "It's not touching the ground. How could it possibly be a bear?" I replied. We still didn't feel anything from it. This whole time we were just staring at it, confused. "You want to get closer to it?" she asked me. I agreed, and we began to slowly walk towards it. It still didn't move. It didn't change. It didn't do anything at all. We stopped when we were 10 yards away from it. We stared some more, until it began to change shape again. It was nothing drastic. It just narrowed ever so slightly in shape. It got skinnier and taller all at once. It still made no noise or anything. All of a sudden, though, it had a presence to it, and it was not a good one. There was a sudden pressure and weight among us. It was the most intense feeling of panic I've ever experienced in my life. It felt like getting hit by a freight train. I've never felt panic like this. Hell, I rolled my car going 70 on the highway once, and the feeling I got when the tires picked up off the road does not even compare to the feeling this thing gave me. I froze. I just couldn't move. I couldn't even speak, for that matter. Oh God, I thought, it's coming towards us. Despite the fact that it never appeared to get closer, this was what was running through my mind. All it was really doing, though, was maintaining that taller shape, as if on cue. Rose mimicked my thoughts aloud. "It's running at us!" She screamed and grabbed my arm, snapping me out of the trance and pulling me back toward the campsite. The feelings of panic vanished quickly after we began running, so we actually ended up coming back later with the flashlight. As you could probably guess, though, it was long gone, and there wasn't a trace of anything left. We managed to fall asleep okay that night. Thankfully, I haven't seen anything like that since on that land, and 7 years later, I'm rather well versed in different cryptids and creatures around here, but nothing I've ever come across or heard of matched the description of this shape. Summer Camp Creature from CJ. When my grandpa was 14 to 15 years old, he went to a summer camp with a couple of friends of his. The camp was in the middle of a forest next to a little river, which connects to a lake. This was where my grandpa's gang was hanging out. My grandpa told me that they heard something strange on the first day coming from the woods. They were walking around the campsite when something agile, fast, and huge began to move in the woods. On that first night, they heard something banging on the door to their cabin, but as they went to the door to check who it was, they heard something huge stomping around, then running back to the forest. When they opened the door, whoever it was gone. When the next day rolled around, there was this day of doom, as my grandpa called it. They had a little campfire in the woods with some other campers. When the other campers were leaving, saying their goodbyes, to return to their cabins, the moment they were gone, something like a massive branch or even a tree snapped in half behind the remaining campers. When a couple of the guys went to investigate, all they found were thin, human-like footprints, but they definitely weren't human. These footsteps led to a cave-like structure. They couldn't make out much as it was dark already. They began to enter the cave, but were immediately hit with the most foul stench coming from it. Beyond that, there were corpses of animals. Many of them were stacked together, but all of them had had their chests ripped open. But that wasn't the worst thing they found in that cave. They soon stumbled upon something that was gnawing at one of the bodies. Something that was thin, with spikes on its back. The group of them began to run from the cave. They did not have the right arms to protect themselves, so they ran out and ran back to the campsite, hoping that the strange-looking creature never noticed his human intruders. But when the scream came from that cave, they realized that they had just made it mad. They ran into the cabin and stayed up all night, watching the windows and hoping that that thing did not come for them. My grandpa was happy to get out of that cave alive, and still does not know what kind of monster they saw. My camping experience from Aaron 23411. I live in Alaska, and this story took place when I was about 10. During the summer, I always went camping. On this occasion, I went camping with my best friend Anna and her family. During this summer, her father wanted to go to the middle of nowhere at camp. I wasn't as up for it as the usual camping trips, but I didn't want to stay home, so I went with them. As we were entering the campsite, I was kind of spooked by a sign that read, "Beware of bears." Being little, I thought that I was sure to get attacked if I was left alone. Also, we left early in the morning that day and did not make it to the campsite until 2 p.m. I was really tired and sore from being in the car so long, and eventually I got out of the car to help unpack. The camp we went to was surrounded by woods, of course, and had a little pit for a fire. It was actually a great spot for our tent. Later on, we finally got settled, and Anna wanted to go fishing. There was a lake and a stream nearby, so that's perfect. We grabbed our fishing poles and tried to leave on our own, but we were stopped by her family, who told us not to go alone, so they made us go with her brothers. We had to make our own path, and her older brother had a machete to cut a path. It took us a while to get to the stream, but we made it. While we were fishing, a sudden chill went down my spine. I said that I was ready to go back, but then Dan, the oldest brother, got frustrated because we had just got here really, and if I wanted to go back, I'd have to go back on my own. Anna said not to worry, that we could go back together. So together we left down the path that we had just taken, but in fact, this was a different path. We had gotten them confused. We didn't realize this until we made it to a dead end. We were surrounded by raspberry bushes and began to freak out. Out of nowhere, we heard someone walking through the woods around us. They were coming towards us slowly. I said it could be a bear. We freaked out even more because we couldn't see a thing through the thick underbrush. When I saw smoke coming from a fire not too far away, I grabbed Anna by the arm and we began to run towards it. Thorns and low-hanging branches did their damage to us, leaving us with cuts and bruises. But we didn't care, as we did not want to get caught by whoever was following us. The one time I looked back, I saw a tall man rushing through the woods after us, a man with an angry look on his face, along with a long and massive beard. He looked like he had been living in the forest his whole life. I screamed and ran faster until we burst into the campsite. The man did not follow us that far, but we were safe now that we were back. I do not know what he wanted to do with us that day, or who he was. I mean, for all I know, he could have been trying to help, but I wasn't going to take the chance to do that. I've never gone camping in that area again. I'm a bit too scarred from that experience. Camp Creeper, from Anonymous. I was 11 years old. I was going camping with my girl guiding troupe for the weekend. I had missed my drama club and a singing audition, so I hoped it would be worth the trip. Because I was one of the youngest there, I was fuming when I was told we were in a tent meant for 4, but I was sharing it with 7 other people. After I set up my sleeping bag, my best friend and I decided to go into the disco our troupe had. No one else, just our troupe. It was just me and my best friend along with 2 other people, as well as the DJ at the time. Now, me and my friends did not pay much attention to him until my best friend pulled me aside and whispered, "I think that DJ's looking at us weird. I think he's checking us out." At the time, I believed every single conspiracy theory on the internet, so I was of course believing and suspicious. I remember I was dancing with my friend when I made eye contact with him. Like any preteen girl, I was kind of embarrassed, but when he locked eyes with me, I knew then that what she said was right. He must have been watching us for a while. When we got back to our tent, we joked around about him with the other girls, but he still creeped me out. The next day, or should I say night, there was another disco, but this one was huge in comparison. There were about 25 other guide districts there, and it was now only 3 of us, including my best friend, in our little group. We ran in and started dancing. It was the same DJ again though, so I felt uncomfortable right away. He was still looking at me and my friends despite so many people being here. At one point I left to go to the bathroom, and I just didn't go back. The next day, we did this fitness thing, 5 sessions in a row to be exact. And for some reason that creepy DJ was also there. While we were being kids who were wanting to lose weight, the DJ was packing up his stuff because it was the last day of camp. He was standing there for 5 sessions straight, just watching us, staring at us with a smile. Remember, I was 11 at the time. The other girls weren't much older either. After that camp was over, I wished that I had gone to that audition instead. Well, Memorial Day is coming to a close. I hope you all made it a good one, and I hope all of you veterans listening had the best time. Thank you for what you've done, and a big thanks goes out to everyone who is no longer with us because they've made the ultimate sacrifice. Good night. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you have a story you want heard, share it with us at darkstories.org. If you want to support the show, check the links in the description. There's a link to my Patreon where you can donate, and a link to my store to get some creepy shirts. Now, as usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous video, about 5 random in-the-woods horror stories. Haley Campbell says, "You're next, Darkness. I don't know what I did, but bring it on, I guess." Scardro says, "I wish I was in the woods. I wish I was in the ground." Fireshard2 Vlog says, "Darkness, please do Hodag scary stories." I've never heard of a Hodag before, but I'll read your second comment describing it. A Hodag is a creature with fangs, horns, and spikes down its tail and has claws, has blood-red eyes, and has dark green fur. They're known to eat white bulldogs, turtles, snakes, and oxen. That's a really specific diet, but it sounds like a very menacing creature. Shrek says, "Congrats on 420,000 subs. You guys are more excited about me having 420k than any other milestone. I guess me and the new bunny should probably party tonight." And Jay Gona says, "I'm Dirty Dan. You can be Dirty Dan all you want. If I'm a Dan, I'm gonna be a clean one. 2 showers a day, thanks." Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode. But don't you worry, more scary stories are on the way soon, so stay tuned. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to donate. They're great people. Remember, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.